Chapter 50-31. Looking at the sudden appearance of the flaming lion, Bewitching's eyes also showed a trace of seriousness. In the next moment, a trace of bloody smell quietly appeared, mixed with endless killing intent, erupted with Bewitching as the center. The dense killing intent and shocking bloody smell made people's hearts tremble for no reason. The Bewitching in front of them also became undefeatable. Immediately after, everyone noticed that Bewitching's aura suddenly increased, from Nebula Level 1 to Nebula Level 3. After feeling that tyrannical aura that really did exist, everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at each other and wondered if they had seen wrongly. Am I seeing things? How could Bewitching's aura suddenly increase? I heard that there are some secret techniques that can help practitioners increase their strength in a short period of time. But usually there are very serious repercussions. Could it be that Bewitching is using this method? It's not a matter of life and death. Bewitching shouldn't use this method. Everyone looked at each other. One after another ideas appeared in their minds, but they were all rejected by them in the end. This kind of method was really unfamiliar to them. Most importantly, they had never heard of the D family having such a method. After Bewitching displayed his aura, Ming felt a pressure enveloping him, making him unable to fully display his strength. This discovery made him extremely shocked. At his level of cultivation, there was still someone who could use aura to suppress him. This was a bit too terrifying. However, after he reacted, he was more envious. As long as he killed Bewitching and obtained this secret technique, his battle strength would increase by another level. Without a doubt, this was the best reward. After Bewitching increased his aura, he didn't use any attribute power, and still used his spirit energy to deal with the enemy. Facing the huge flaming lion, Bewitching seemed very small, but he was not afraid in the face of danger. Bang bang bang. At the same time, Bewitching stomped his foot on the flaming lion's head, and then he stabbed out with the severed passion sword, and obliterated the flaming lion. Seeing this, Ming's heart trembled. Bewitching was already so powerful, without using his elemental power. If he were to use his elemental power, Ming would likely not be a match for him. At the same time, some of the cultivators present were experienced and knowledgeable. After repeated analysis, they determined the source of Bewitching's aura. Could this be an abyssal inheritance? One of the cultivators stared at Bewitching in a daze, his face filled with amazement. As soon as this was said, everyone couldn't help but think of the two great abysses in the lower realms. Could it be the blood chi field and the killing chi field? According to the records, this situation is exactly the same as Bewitching's, and Bewitching also came from the lower realm. That's right, it's really like that. In that case, Bewitching really is a genius. This kind of inheritance isn't something that can be obtained so easily. For a moment, the way everyone looked at Bewitching changed. They were filled with emotion, surprise, and a trace of envy and admiration. Ming also heard the conversation of the crowd, and his gaze became complicated. You used an abyssal inheritance? Chapter 50-32. That's right. Bewitching didn't try to hide it. Anyone who understood this kind of inheritance would be able to tell. After receiving an affirmative answer, Ming's expression became somewhat awkward. He had previously vowed that Bewitching was secretly nurtured by the D family, but the characteristics of the two abyss made him understand that this was simply impossible. However, Bewitching came from the lower realm, yet he was still able to reach such a cultivation level. This was truly a little too terrifying. At the very least, his potential far exceeded that of most of the people present. After Jun Lingxuan saved his life from Bewitching, he turned to attack Mo Yunjue. Mo Yunjue's death was also somewhat related to Mo Yunjue. At present, he couldn't personally kill Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang. As long as he could kill Mo Yunjue, it could be considered as collecting some interest to comfort Bewitching's soul in heaven. When Mo Yunjue saw that Jun Lingxuan actually treated him as an easy target, a trace of coldness and bloodlust quietly flashed through his deep black hole-like eyes. Recalling how Bailey Hongzhuang had almost died under Jun Lingxuan's scheme, the killing intent in his heart continued to swell. Ever since he came to the upper realm, his mentality had become much calmer. However, when he was in the lower realm, he lived in a killing field. Originally, there were too many people who wanted to deal with Jun Lingxuan, so it was impossible for them to fall into his hands in a short time. However, he didn't expect that Jun Lingxuan would actually take the initiative to find him. This was exactly what he wanted. Jun Lingxuan looked at Mo Yunjue in front of him, and a complacent and sinister smile appeared on his lips. You're called Mo Yunjue, right? You also had a part to play in Bewitching's death. Today, I'll send you to the underworld to apologize to Bewitching. Jun Lingxuan was very confident. In his opinion, Mo Yunjue was just a cultivator from the lower realm. Although he had displayed considerable strength in the battle with Xiao Sou, there was still an insurmountable gap between them. However, in the face of Jun Lingxuan's arrogant appearance, Mo Yunjue's response was his fist. You talk too much. His chiseled face was unusually cold, and there was a trace of impatience in the depths of his eyes. To him, if he could use his hands to do so, Jun Lingxuan didn't expect that Mo so directly. He was caught off guard, and was to the point to his nose to his face, was to be caught unprepared. He covered his nose as blood continued to flow from the gaps between his fingers. He looked very pathetic. He looked at Mo Yunjue and wanted to say, "Why didn't you follow the rules?" However, Mo Yunjue didn't give him any time to hesitate and attacked again. Fuck. Jun Lingxuan couldn't help but curse. I can't beat Bewitching, but you think I can't beat you? You're from the lower realm, yet you still dare to be so arrogant. Then you can try. Mo Yunjue's expression was ice-cold, but his attacks were even more ferocious. However, after this exchange, Jun Lingxuan realized that Mo Yunjue was also an extremely powerful existence. This was because he felt a terrifying murderous aura enveloping him. The aura that Mo Yunjue emitted was like that of the god of death from hell, causing people's hearts to tremble unconsciously. Under the influence of this murderous aura, his performance was also affected. How was this possible? Jun Lingxuan was dumbfounded. Why were the methods of this fellow from the lower realm so strange? Chapter 50-33. Not only that, after Mo Yunjue had unleashed his murderous aura, Bailey Hongzhuang had also unleashed her murderous aura and blood aura. Instantly gasps were heard. Everyone at the scene was dumbfounded. Wasn't the Abyss inheritance supposed to be very difficult? How could there be 3 of them at once? Everyone looked at each other, and secretly decided to check the information carefully when they returned. Perhaps they had made a mistake. Lin Taxing and the others looked at the power displayed by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 and sighed with joy. Previously, they had only heard about it from Mo Yunjue. Now that they had seen the 3 of them display it, they finally understood how powerful the Abyss inheritance was. Initially, Di Xiaofeng was very worried that Bewitching would be in danger when faced with Chu Yingming's attack. He never thought that Bewitching would be able to stabilize the situation. After discovering this, he did not continue to deal with Chu Yingming. At a time like this, it was undoubtedly the best time for Bewitching to make a name for himself. A faint smell of blood spread through the air. In this fiery battle, cultivators would be injured or even killed from time to time. Even so, both sides had no intention of stopping. To them, this was a situation where they would not rest until one of them was dead. Unless one side was completely annihilated, they would not stop. The situation gradually turned from fiery to tragic. However, at this moment, a cry of surprise suddenly rang out. Look, what's that? In their line of sight, a monstrous beast had appeared not too far away. Its fierce eyes were locked onto them, as if it would attack at any time. Hearing this person's cry of surprise, everyone was stunned at first. However, when they saw that it was only a monstrous beast, they could not help but roll their eyes. It's only a monstrous beast. You don't have to be so nervous. But we've never encountered a monstrous beast ever since we came to the Immortal Cloud secret realm. What's the big deal about not encountering one? It's only a monstrous beast. How powerful can it be? Everyone shook their heads and felt that they were making a fuss over nothing. However, soon after, everyone could no longer maintain their indifferent look. This was because a series of beast roars rang out not too far away. Roar. Uwa. The roars of the demonic beasts were intertwined and continuous, causing one's heart to tremble. When Bewitching and the others noticed this, they couldn't help but slow down their movements as they turned their gazes to the front. What's going on? Why did so many demonic beasts suddenly appear? Xiren frowned and looked around cautiously. His intuition told him that the situation was not simple. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching couldn't help but look at each other, their expressions heavy. Long ago, they had already realized that everything here was a test. Therefore, they did not relax even after passing through the school of fish, because they knew that they would only encounter more tests. It was just that they didn't expect the test to come so quickly. They didn't even have time to deal with their opponents. Master, there are many demonic beasts coming. Baisher's voice was filled with caution and seriousness. And these demonic beasts are not simple. Hearing Baisher's words, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. As the Beast King, Baisher had the best understanding of demonic beasts. Chapter 50-34. As the voice fell, everyone realized that there was a large group of demonic beasts surrounding the area. Previously, their line of sight was blocked by the trees. In addition, the battle between Bewitching and the others was too big, attracting all their attention. They didn't even have time to pay attention to their surroundings. Even though there was a cultivator's warning, they only noticed the demonic beast at the front. They didn't notice the other demonic beasts under the cover of the trees. Is that a single-horned spotted leopard? Not only is there a single-horned spotted leopard, there's also a green demon beast. There are many different types of demonic beasts. Why did so many demonic beasts suddenly appear? Could it be that all the demonic beasts have gathered here? Then what do we do now? Everyone's faces gradually turned pale. Looking at the demonic beasts that were getting closer and closer to them, they couldn't help but want to retreat. However, the school of piranhas behind them were also eyeing them covetously. If they retreated, they would end up in the belly of the piranhas. When Bewitching and the others saw this situation, they stopped moving. Although the grudge between them was important, facing so many demonic beasts, even if one side won, it was very likely that they would end up as food in the stomach of these demonic beasts. Seeing this, Bewitching and Chu Yingming looked at each other and made a decision. Let's put aside today's matter for now. After we deal with these demonic beasts, we'll fight again. Chu Yingming's eyes were fierce. The more he discovered how outstanding Bewitching was, the stronger his killing intent became. No matter what, he wanted to make Bewitching stay in the immortal cloud secret realm forever. Otherwise, once he left, there would be a lot of trouble in the future. Okay. Bewitching's expression was cold. He didn't speak ruthlessly like Chu Yingming, but his cold eyes showed his attitude. When it came to fighting, he was never afraid. Jun Lingshuan's expression was very ugly. Originally, this was an excellent opportunity for him, because he could get the biggest benefits with the smallest cost. Because in this group, the Jun family's cultivators were undoubtedly the least. On the other hand, the Di family and the Lin family had quite a number of cultivators. This was equivalent to borrowing the hands of the Chu clan, Nangong clan, and Xiao clan's disciples to help his clan get rid of a huge threat. As long as he didn't die, no matter what, this was a good deal. Even if all the members of the family had died, there were still others in the family. However, the Di family and the Lin family were different. They were the mainstays of the family. Once all these people died here, they would have the upper hand. However, he didn't expect that something like this would happen in the middle of the battle, causing him to be unable to continue the battle. One could imagine how depressed he was. Ling Sun, what should we do? Xiao Soa looked at the group of demonic beasts that were eyeing them covetously. Her palm-sized face was pale and nervous. This feeling was even more panicky than when she was facing a school of fish. Once he fell into the mouth of this demonic beast, he would similarly be reduced to ashes. Jun Lingshuan patted Xiao Soa's shoulder and comforted her. Don't worry, there are so many of us. We will definitely think of a way. Xiao Soa nodded slightly, but her nervous expression betrayed her heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were also sizing up the situation in front of them. At a glance, they could see a black mass of demonic beasts. Chapter 50-35. Xiao Hei's lips twitched slightly. Previously, it had thought that the training in the upper realm was easier than the lower realm. They only needed to worry about whether there would be opponents, and did not need to worry about other dangers. However, it now seemed that it had been too naive. It was not that there was no danger. All the dangers were gathered together. In comparison, it still preferred the training in the lower realm, because the training in front of it was really testing its heart's endurance. I understand too. Xiao Bai could not help but speak up. It was also feeling helpless. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her hand and patted the two little fellows' heads. Although the situation in front of them was full of danger, it did not cause her to panic completely. She believed that since Xiao Hei and Xiao Bai's master had set up such a test, there was a possibility of success. Otherwise, this test would be meaningless. However, it would not be easy to pass this test. As the demonic beasts gradually approached, the crowd could not help but retreat. They only stopped when they reached the riverbank. At the same time, the group clearly understood the terrifying number of monsters. This was because they could not see the end of it. What should we do now? There are so many monsters. If we want to rush over, we can't do it even if all of us attack together. The single-horned spotted leopard and the green demon beast. Their combat power is not simple. With our current number of people, we are completely at a disadvantage against them. There's nothing we can do. We have no way out. The group could not help but want to cry. They had never encountered such a hopeless situation in their previous training. Ever since they had been chased by the locusts, they had felt more and more hopeless each time. In the past, they only hoped to stay in the immortal cloud mystery realm for a while longer. Now their biggest wish was to leave this place. The immortal cloud mystery realm was now a nightmarish existence in their eyes. Even if they managed to survive today, no one knew what would happen tomorrow. This situation is really too tricky. Di Xiaofeng frowned. Once these monsters attack, we can hold on for a short period of time. However, after a long time, our primary energy will be exhausted and our bodies will not be able to take it. Taking turns to fight is not something we can handle. Indeed, Lin Taxing's face was also very ugly. But there is no way out now. The only thing we can do is to hold on as long as we can. Don't worry, we'll find a way. Di Beichen's clear and pleasant voice sounded, blowing away the anxiety in everyone's hearts like a spring breeze. Looking at his confident face, everyone couldn't help but recall how many times they had wanted to give up. But fortunately, they had persevered in the end. There was nothing that couldn't be solved. As long as they worked hard, they might be able to come up with a solution. Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, and his sexy lips curved into a warm smile. Don't be afraid, we'll kill them. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. At the same time, Wen Xiren and Shengguan Yingying immediately understood what Di Beichen meant. In fact, when they were in the oceanic world, they had also been attacked by countless monsters. Thinking back to that period of time, he was really abnormally tired. However, it had to be said that under such a torturous battle, their improvement was also very fast. Chapter 50-36. Although Ao Lingxiao and Mo Yunjue felt extremely helpless about the situation in front of them, they did not despair because of it. When they faced the skeleton army, they had also fought like this. They were no stranger to being surrounded. For a moment, they could not help but laugh. When Lin Taxing and the others saw that Di Beichen and the others could still laugh at this time, they were stunned. However, before they could ask, the monsters had already rushed over. Everyone be careful, Emperor Xiaofeng yelled, and everyone immediately entered battle mode. Countless monsters seemed to treat Bailey Hongzhuang and the others as delicious food. They rushed over in a hurry, only wanting to fill their stomachs. Various colored primary forces were unleashed, bringing with them a tyrannical and terrifying force, directly killing the monsters in front of them. The smell of blood spread in the air. When the demonic beasts saw this situation, their eyes flashed with fear for a moment. However, They were quickly defeated by hunger and attacked again. Even though this move had achieved a great effect, none of the cultivators present felt happy about it. This was because the monsters killed were insignificant to this monster horde. Bailey Hongzhuang took out the nine-tailed zither. The sound of the zither poured out from her 10 fingers, bringing with it a 7-colored primary force as it jumped on the zither strings. When everyone saw this scene, their gazes changed slightly. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang also knew the art of zither music? Immediately after, they realized that the sound waves had condensed into substance, bringing with them a tyrannical force as they attacked a large number of monsters. The pleasant sound of the zither rang out, attacking wave after wave like a tidal wave. The monsters that were rushing forward were also affected, and the monsters at the front were directly sent flying. Compared to everyone's martial skills that only attacked in one direction, Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music attack undoubtedly had a wide range. Most importantly, with the help of the zither music, the possibility of being ambushed by the monsters was greatly reduced. As everyone fought, they could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Her clothes were whiter than snow, and her facial features were exquisite and elegant, as if she was a work of art carefully carved by the heavens. Just looking at her was enough to make people forget to breathe. 7-colored essence force danced between her body, and it was as beautiful as a painting. If not for the endless demonic beasts in the surroundings spoiling the atmosphere, this scene would really be pleasing to the eye. However, it was also because of the existence of these demonic beasts that this scene entered the hearts of everyone. Who would have thought that not only is Bailey Hongzhuang an alchemist, but she is also very strong. She even knows the art of the zither. The art of the zither is extremely difficult to master. However, if one is proficient in the art of the zither, one would be an extremely powerful existence. I'm really envious of Bewitching now. He's picked up a treasure. Even though they were focused on dealing with the demonic beasts, everyone couldn't help but feel envious. Who wouldn't want such a wife? This was especially true for the guy who had previously mocked Bewitching for picking up sesame seeds and throwing away watermelons. Now, he felt that he was the one who was truly short-sighted. Bailey Hongzhuang was the real treasure. Xiao Sou's face was ashen. Hearing everyone's undisguised praise for Bailey Hongzhuang, her heart was filled with depression. She didn't know when it started, but she and Bailey Hongzhuang had been compared by everyone. Chapter 50-37. However, now that everyone was comparing her to Bailey Hongzhuang, she had long lost her initial confidence. She had failed time and time again. Everyone's one-sided attitude had caused her heart to break down. One had to know that in the past, she was the true proud daughter of heaven. No matter where she appeared, she was always sought after by everyone. Many men had spent a lot of effort just to be able to speak to her. But now, in the eyes of these people, she had become Bailey Hongzhuang's foil. Most importantly, Bailey Hongzhuang was already married, but these people's gazes were still so hot. How could she not be deeply affected? Just as everyone was amazed by Bailey Hongzhuang's performance, Bailey Hongzhuang herself was somewhat dissatisfied. Back then, when she was dealing with the skeletons, the lethality of her zither music was much stronger than now. However, she also understood that it was because these monstrous beasts were much stronger. Now the cultivators she met were all stronger than the previous one. Many of her methods had to be improved. Otherwise, she might not be able to keep up in the future. Ling Sun, do you know why Bailey Hongzhuang's origin energy is 7-colored? Xiao Sou's face was filled with doubt. In fact, she had long felt that this question was strange. It was just that she had never been able to figure out why it was like this. According to her understanding, she had never heard of such origin energy. Jun Lingxuan shook his head. He had also been attracted by Bailey Hongzhuang's performance earlier. However, after noticing the conflicted look on Xiao Sou's face, he had more or less guessed Xiao Sou's thoughts. However, he was now wholeheartedly focused on dealing with this monstrous beast. He was not in the mood to pay attention to these things. I've never heard of it either. Why don't we look through the books when we get back? I believe there will be records of it. Hearing Jun Lingxuan's words, Xiao Sou also nodded. She secretly made up her mind that when she got back, She would definitely investigate this point clearly. She wanted to figure out what was so special about Bailey Hongzhuang. In my opinion, we can't stay here forever. Why don't we move forward together? At this time, Chen Feng's voice resounded. If we continue to stay here, it means that unless we kill all these demonic beasts, we won't have a chance to leave this place. As Chen Feng finished speaking, a contemplative look flashed through everyone's eyes before they nodded their heads to express their agreement. That's right. Let's go ahead and take a look. It might be the same as those locusts from before. As long as we leave some distance, we'll be able to escape safely. That may be the case, but if we advance, our attacks will become stronger. If we can't break out in a short time, I'm afraid that the situation will be even worse if we get surrounded. Nangong Yiqing frowned. He felt that it was too dangerous. In this case, what difference does it make whether we are surrounded or not? Lin Taxing asked. It's better to move forward together and fight for a chance. Nangong Yiqing's face was livid. Lin Taxing, can you guarantee that we'll find a chance to leave this place? Nangong Yiqing, what you said is interesting. I'm only saying that it's possible. Lin Taxing's eyes were cold, and his tone was filled with displeasure. Seeing that both sides were opposing each other, Chen Feng couldn't help but suggest, since everyone has different opinions, why don't we vote? Chapter 5038. Everyone understood what Chen Feng was trying to say. At a time of life and death like this, all personal grudges should be put aside for the time being. After all, they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers when faced with so many demonic beasts. If they continued to fight, it would only weaken their strength, and their chances of survival would be even lower. In fact, the previous battle had already caused them great losses. Both sides had suffered casualties. Even the surviving cultivators had sustained uncontrollable injuries. The amount of elemental energy they had consumed was obviously incomparable to when they were at their peak. If this continued, they would truly be finished. Soon, everyone raised their hands to vote. Due to the large number of people, only the leader of each faction would vote. In the end, the majority of the cultivators chose to move forward. When Nangong Yiqing saw this, his expression turned ashen. However, he did not continue arguing. Since everyone has decided, let's try to move forward. Chen Feng had a solemn expression on his face. As an existence that might very well be the strongest here. At a time like this, his words were extremely authoritative. During this process, we have to be extra careful. The cultivators at the front will be in charge of attacking, while the cultivators at the sides will be in charge of defense. As for the cultivators at the center, they will take this opportunity to recover their elemental energy. When the cultivators at the front can no longer hold on, it will be your turn. Chen Feng voiced his thoughts. At a time like this, he did not bother asking for their opinions. Instead, he spoke in a tone that brooked no refusal. He understood that there were a lot of experts in this group. However, at this moment, he was the one with the fewest objections. If it had been anyone else, their opponents would have definitely stood out to refute him. If that had happened, the situation would have gotten even worse. Rather than that, he might as well make the decision himself and save himself some trouble. Hearing Chen Feng's order, Bewitching and the rest did not have any objections. In fact, under such circumstances, this method was undoubtedly the best choice. Only by working together would they have a chance of leaving this damnable place. Let's move out now then, Chen Feng said loudly. Those who participated in the battle earlier, stay in the center and recover your elemental energy. The rest of you spread out in the surroundings. Everyone here was a genius. After understanding what they were going to do, they quickly formed a formation and started moving forward together. Determination and nervousness filled everyone's faces. From the moment they chose to move forward, they already had no way out. If they continued to walk, they would only be surrounded. If all of them were exhausted and still couldn't break out, then they would only have a dead end. Even so, they still chose to do so, because at least this way, there was still a glimmer of hope, even if it was equally slim. Bailey Hongzhuang walked in the middle of the group and put away her nine-tailed zither. She understood the deeper meaning behind Qinfeng's arrangement. She had to recover her elemental energy as soon as possible. Xiao Suo was standing not far away from Bailey Hongzhuang. She clearly wished that Bailey Hongzhuang would die as soon as possible, yet she was forced to join forces at this time. One could imagine the displeasure in her heart. As the cultivators in front released their martial skills one after another, the speed at which they advanced was also very fast. After all, they were all cultivators at the Starlight Realm and above, so their martial techniques were naturally powerful. Chapter 5039. Facing such a situation, everyone felt very helpless. If they could, they would rather conserve their elemental energy. However, the horn-spotted leopards were extremely fast. If they were not careful, they would pounce on them. Once the horn-spotted leopards got close to them, their necks might be bitten off. With so many horn-spotted leopards staring at them, no one was willing to take such a risk. Rather than that, they would rather spend more elemental energy. At least they could preserve their lives for the time being. Bailey Hongzhuang held the spirit stones with both hands and activated the demon summoning scripture. She continuously absorbed the elemental energy in the spirit stones for her own use. For this trip to the Immortal Cloud Secret Realm, the family had prepared quite a number of spirit stones for them. Bailey Hongzhuang was very clear about the power of the demon summoning scripture that she cultivated. As her cultivation level increased, the demon summoning scripture was no longer limited to meditation. She could do it even when she was walking. This was the power of a taboo cultivation technique. Because it was too powerful, it was called a taboo cultivation technique. However, other cultivators needed elixirs to recover their elemental energy. This made everyone feel very helpless. Although Bewitching's situation was different from Bailey Hongzhuang's, the effects were quite similar. The heavenly mandate body was the most suitable body for cultivation. This was why it was so powerful. Ever since Bewitching's body changed, his cultivation speed was different from before. The reason why he was able to break through to the Nebula Realm so quickly was not only because of the D family's cultivation room, but also because of his heavenly mandate body. During the process of walking, Bewitching could also use his heavenly mandate body to absorb the elemental energy in the air. Everyone was moving forward at their fastest speed. Only in this way could they see hope. Once they slowed down, they did not know when they would be able to pass through this group of demonic beasts. When the demonic beasts saw that the group had started to move, the covetous look in their eyes became even more intense. Instantly, their attacks became even more violent. I suddenly remembered the time when we were facing the skeleton army. Bailey Hongzhuang's clear eyes were filled with emotions. She turned to look at Bewitching. Back then, they had encountered such a situation because they had mistakenly entered the training grounds. At that time, it was also extremely thrilling. Fortunately, they were safe in the end. Hearing this, Bewitching also recalled that scene. He smiled and said, "It's a pity that it's not an army of skeletons in front of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to worry so much." Ever since they started cultivating the power of darkness, they were no longer afraid of the skeleton army. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. However, even if it is a demonic beast in front of us, we will definitely be safe. Bailey Hongzhuang's clear and melodious voice was filled with confidence and determination. No matter how desperate the situation was, she was still full of confidence. It wasn't just them. Xiren and the others weren't too flustered either. After all, they had already experienced many similar situations. When the crowd noticed the calm expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, they felt a little strange. Even they were unable to remain calm. It was too strange for these people from the lower realm to be so calm. Bailey Hongzhuang handed the healing medicine to the cultivators in her team. In the previous battle, everyone had been injured. Some of them were even seriously injured. Taking the medicinal pills did have a certain effect. However, the medicine that Bailey Hongzhuang had concocted was also very effective. Chapter 5040. Regardless of whether it was the D family or the Lin family cultivators, They all knew that Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills were outstanding and were full of confidence in her. Therefore, after receiving the medicine, they consumed it without hesitation. Morong Jing's eyes were filled with astonishment. He suddenly felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was like the D family's treasure bag. No matter what it was always in her hands. It was the same for the pills that they had used to recover their elemental energy. Now it was the same for this medicine. Could it be that they had assumed that Bailey Hongzhuang was a woman, and that most people would not attack her? So they had placed everything on her? Even though his heart was filled with doubts, Morong Jing did not ask any questions. Instead, he accepted the medicine with gratitude. After all, this was not a good time to ask questions. The waves of martial techniques continued to spread, and the air was filled with all kinds of elemental energy. As the number of demonic beasts increased, the stench of blood became more and more intense. This bloody scene did not deter the demonic beasts. On the contrary, it stimulated their bloodlust, causing their attacks to become more and more violent. During this process, there were also some cultivators who were careless and were attacked. In the blink of an eye, they lost their lives. This caused the crowd to sigh. However, in the face of danger at any time, they did not even have the time to mourn the dead. They had to be on guard against danger at all times. Under such a ferocious attack, although the crowd's speed was fast, the speed at which people were replaced was also fast. Not long after, a new batch of people had been replaced. In addition to the large size of the formation, there were many cultivators in charge of defending against the attacks. However, the corresponding recovery of elemental energy was slower. Previously, when they were avoiding the locusts, they only needed to run. The consumption of elemental energy was not as fast as now. Now it was the rapid consumption of elemental energy. However, during this process, the crowd was shocked to discover something. This discovery made everyone feel a burst of joy. Did you notice that after killing these demonic beasts, a pure energy entered our bodies? A cultivator exclaimed in surprise. His pale and tired face revealed a hint of surprise. As soon as the cultivator finished speaking, everyone was slightly taken aback at first, but they quickly realized the existence of this point. That's right, it seems to be the case. Previously, I was so focused on the battle that I didn't notice this situation. Now that I think about it carefully, it really is like this. Not bad. Everyone looked at each other. This was the only good news among the countless bad news. Every one of them hoped to improve their cultivation. For a moment, the cultivators who were in charge of blocking the demonic beast stopped complaining. After all, they could only reap the rewards by taking action. Bailey Hongzhuang was also surprised when she heard the news. She didn't expect the demonic beast to have such a characteristic. It was really surprising. Perhaps this is the reward for the test. Bewitching smiled faintly. If he wasn't sure that this was a test before, he was now completely convinced. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. As long as everyone can persevere, there are many benefits to hunting demonic beasts. Not long after, it was Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' turn to defend. Chen Feng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching worriedly. Both of you haven't recovered for long. Can you withstand it? Chapter 50-41. Bewitching and the rest had already exhausted a lot of their energy. Adding on the fact that they did not have much time to recover, they would not be able to hold on for long. On the other hand, Jun Lingxuan and the rest were still standing in the center of the group. Obviously, they were waiting for Bewitching and the rest to make a move before they would appear. Looking at Chen Feng's worried expression, Bewitching waved his hand with a smile and said, "Don't worry, we're fine." Chen Feng sighed helplessly. Under such circumstances, he had no other choice. Be careful. If you can't hold on, change people. At this moment, Chu Yingming's voice sounded. We've already advanced quite a distance, but we've exhausted a lot of our energy. During this journey, we can only rely on pills to recover. After what happened earlier, we don't have many pills left. Since hunting demonic beasts can recover our energy, in my opinion, why don't we stay here for a while and let everyone recover their energy before leaving? How about it? Hearing this, everyone thought for a while before nodding their heads. If they continued like this, they would not be able to walk for long before they exhausted all their energy. Resting for a while before continuing forward was undoubtedly a good idea. I agree. I agree as well. Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang looked at each other and did not have any objections. They had also realized this before, so it was necessary for them to stay for a while. Since that's the case, let's rest here for a while. When everyone's energy has more or less recovered, we'll continue forward, Chen Feng said. As soon as he said this, everyone sighed in relief and sat down to recover their energy. The Di family's cultivators quickly appeared outside. Di Xiaofeng and the rest were originally prepared to come out as well. However, they were rejected by Di Baichen. You guys recover your energy first. These demonic beasts are very strong. You guys will be in charge of leading the next group. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Don't worry, Di Baichen and I can handle it. And with our cooperation, Wen Xiren added with a smile. Are you sure? Di Xiaofeng couldn't help but worry. Di Baichen and the others had also used up a lot of elemental energy. Yes. All right then. Be careful. After the decision was made, Di Baichen, Wen Xiren, Mo Yunjue, Shengguan Yingying, and Ao Lingxiao moved forward while Bailey Hongzhuang sat behind them. Although the effect of the zither attack was slightly weaker than before, it was still quite effective. As long as they worked together, they should be able to stop him. At the same time, some of the disciples of the Di family were also by their side. They surrounded the recovering cultivators in the center and defended against the attacks of the demonic beasts. Zither music poured out from Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. With Bailey Hongzhuang as the center, her elemental energy spread out in a circle, blocking the attacks of the demonic beasts. Di Baichen held the emotion-severing sword in his hand. His valiant and sharp elemental energy turned into a dazzling sword ray. Everywhere it passed, the corpses of the demonic beasts exploded. Xiren and the rest were not weak either. Now that they were not rushing forward, there was no need for them to use their elemental energy to open a path. The best thing to do was to stall for time and defend against the demonic beasts, so that everyone could have more time to recover. Chapter 50-42. They naturally knew that this method was the best way to stall for time. However, at the same time, this method also meant that they had to be even more careful. The slightest bit of carelessness could result in injuries or even death. At the very least, they did not dare to use this method previously. That was because, in their opinion, as long as the elemental energy in their bodies was exhausted, they would be able to enter the center of the group to rest. Since that was the case, why did they still have to take such a risk? For a moment, they could not understand why Di Baichen and the rest were doing this. Don't they know that this is a very big risk? Is it worth it to waste so much effort to stall for time? A cultivator could not help but sigh with emotion. At a time when everyone was thinking about their own benefits, Di Baichen and the rest's actions caused him to have a peculiar feeling in his heart. Without mentioning anything else, I truly admire Di Baichen and the rest. A gentleman is magnanimous. They are the embodiment of this phrase. If you ask me, without mentioning the benefits of the family, just from my own point of view, this kind of person is what I admire the most. You're right. Chu Yingming and the rest are indeed very powerful. However, when it comes to conduct themselves, they can't compare to Di Baichen. Everyone couldn't help but discuss. Along the way, they couldn't help but be impressed by Di Baichen and the rest. That was because the performance of Di Baichen and the rest gave them a completely different feeling. This feeling was as if their souls had suddenly been purified. Chu Yingming and the rest originally wanted to see Di Baichen and the rest get injured. It would be best if they lost their lives. That way, they would be able to save some effort. However, they did not expect that everyone would suddenly compare them. Moreover, Di Baichen was completely above them. This caused him to be unable to suppress his anger. Inexplicably, why was he being stepped on by Di Baichen? After hearing everyone's discussion, a trace of approval appeared in Chen Feng's eyes. It was also because he saw such a shining point in Di Baichen and the rest that he was willing to stand out. Over the years, the cultivators he had met were all like Chu Yingming and Jun Lingxuan, who placed their own interests above all else. It was rare for him to meet a friend who could confide his back to him without any scruples. However, he understood that Bewitching and the others were like that. Even though Bewitching had become the young master of a family in the upper realm, he did not look down on Bailey Hongzhuang. Similarly, his attitude towards his friends in the lower realm had never changed. If it were anyone else, it would be very difficult for them to do this. Bailey Hongzhuang performed her music, and the beasts also joined the battle. To them, as long as there was an opportunity to increase their strength, they would not give up. Moreover, this was a test. Perhaps this test had something to do with hunting demonic beasts. Therefore, they did not feel that this was a chore. On the contrary, they would often look for such opportunities to gain experience. Since there was a ready-made opportunity in front of them, they naturally had to seize it. Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang was only paying attention to the situation around her. She did not carefully sense the situation within her body. Now, after being reminded by everyone, she found that after killing the demonic beasts, a gust of energy would enter her pill and fuse with her origin energy. This gust of energy was extremely pure, even purer than the origin energy they usually refined. Chapter 50-43. Although Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't figure out the uses of this energy, she knew that it would only bring her benefits. Normally, she would have to spend a lot of effort to refine her yuan energy, but now that she could directly obtain such pure energy, she wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. She didn't hold back at all as she used her zither technique, causing a large area of effect attack to appear. If it was said that the elemental energy gained from killing a single demonic beast was almost undetectable, then the elemental energy gained from killing a large number of demonic beasts was extremely gratifying. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes shone with a bright luster as her attacks became increasingly powerful. At the same time, Bewitching and the others' attacks were also abnormally strong. I feel that this origin energy seems to be very helpful for my own improvement. When Xiren raised his eyebrows slightly, another demonic beast had died under his sharp sword. Shangguan Yingying nodded. I feel that training here will be even more effective. Not only will we be able to improve ourselves, but we'll also be able to reap some benefits. The only downside is that we don't know when we'll reach the end, Ao Lingxiao sighed. When they were in the primordial chaos ring, they knew that they would only need 3 days to leave, but now they didn't know how long they would have to stay here. It was precisely because of this lack of confidence that they felt a trace of torment. Don't think too much about it. Mo Yunjua's expression was calm. Ever since he was young, he had been through this kind of group battle. Therefore, he didn't feel too bad about this situation. Seeing how proud they are, I want to see how long they can last. Jun Lingxuan sneered. Bewitching and the others' high fighting spirit made him feel very unhappy. He originally wanted to embarrass Bewitching and the others, but who would have thought that they would only use him as a foil for Bewitching and the others? They're just newborn calves who aren't afraid of tigers. Nangong Yuqing also had a disdainful expression. They like to show off in front of others. Let's see if they can hold on for long. Most people would only feel that it was unbearable when faced with such a situation. The performance of Bewitching and the others was just an act in his eyes. Xiao Soa didn't say anything, but she agreed. She only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang would make a mistake. Only then would she feel a little better. Chu Yingming was silent as he swept his cold gaze over Bewitching and the others, his gaze filled with resentment. If he didn't kill them, it would be difficult for him to vent the dissatisfaction in his heart. Just when everyone thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would not be able to hold on for long, they found that they were able to withstand wave after wave of attacks from the wicked beasts. Not only that, but there wasn't the slightest trace of exhaustion on their faces. Instead, they became more and more courageous as they fought. Their fighting spirit soared. Even though they weren't far away, they could feel the fighting spirit in their hearts. Wave after wave of demon beasts fell. With Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music and everyone's attacks, There was no gap between them. Originally, the D family's disciples also felt that this situation was very troublesome, but after seeing their young master and young madam's coordination, their mood was affected. It was as if this wasn't an unbearable problem. On the contrary, it was a test for them. Chapter 50-44. Young Master and Young Madam's fighting strength is truly abnormal. It's already been so long, but their fighting strength hasn't weakened at all. That's right, we used a lot of spirit energy before. It's not just the Young Master, but Young Master Mo's fighting strength is also amazing. As time passed, the crowd began to discover the source of the problem. Logically speaking, even if this kind of fighting method saved spirit energy, it should still be within a certain range. However, Bewitching and the others had persisted for far longer than they had imagined. Most importantly, they had just experienced a huge battle. In all fairness, even if they were in their peak condition, they wouldn't be able to last as long as Bewitching and the others. Some of the D family's cultivators had already changed, but Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were still at the forefront of the battle and didn't show any signs of exhaustion. It was to the extent that the disciples of the D clan were affected by their emotions, and their battle prowess was even higher than usual. Jun Lingxuan and the others, who had been waiting to watch a good show, could no longer remain calm after seeing this scene. After a period of rest, their spirit energy had already recovered. Damn, how did these guys persist for so long? Nangong Yuqing furrowed his brows. This situation was too strange. It was completely beyond his expectations. Bewitching's cultivation was slightly lower than his, but he was still able to persist for so long. It was truly strange. These guys are strange. Chu Yingming's eyes were gloomy. He had long felt that these guys were strange. If he could deal with these guys, he would be able to obtain the secrets in their hands. This was undoubtedly what he wanted the most. It is indeed strange. Jun Lingxuan didn't have time to be dissatisfied. His mind was filled with thoughts of how Bewitching and the others had persisted for so long. One had to know that endurance was extremely important for cultivators. However, increasing one's endurance was much more difficult than increasing one's strength. How did these fellows from the lower realm increase their endurance to such a level? He really couldn't understand. Not only them, but Di Xiaofeng and the others' eyes were also full of splendor after seeing this scene. It wasn't until this moment that they understood why Bewitching and the others were so confident. It was because their endurance was simply amazing. Bewitching and the others are really amazing. I'm afraid none of us can match their endurance, right? Lin Taxing looked at Di Xiaofeng. This discovery was really amazing. Previously, he only knew that Bewitching and the others weren't weak. Now he realized that what he knew was only the tip of the iceberg. Di Xiaofeng nodded slightly. On this point, I am ashamed of my inferiority. If we make it back alive, I'll definitely ask Bewitching and the rest how they did it, Lin Qianqian said slowly. I'll have to learn from them too. Once the battle reached its climax, it was obvious that whoever could last until the end would be the winner. Lin Qianqian was. Hearing Lin Qianqian's words, Di Xiaofeng and the others' gazes changed slightly. They made up their minds to learn from them when they returned. Compared to everyone's amazement, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were immersed in their own gains. Chapter 50-45. At the same time, the other cultivators had envious expressions on their faces. If possible, they would also like to consult Bewitching and the rest. However, apart from their own disciples, such a secret could not be told to anyone else. Chu Yingming and the rest exchanged glances. The more outstanding Bewitching and the rest were, the greater the threat they posed to them. If they didn't deal with them quickly, it would only cause them endless trouble in the future. More importantly, Bewitching's method of buying people's hearts was extremely powerful. It was obviously his first time participating in the training, and almost no one here knew him. However, under such circumstances, he was still able to quickly enter everyone's line of sight. Furthermore, his influence had already reached the same level as Chunfeng's. With such ability, even Di Xiaofeng would have to admit defeat. After passing this trial, we must kill him. Xu Yingming transmitted as he looked at Jun Lingxuan and the rest. Hearing that, Jun Lingxuan and the rest exchanged glances and nodded inwardly. This person's influence was already so huge. If he was allowed to continue growing, he would probably become a huge trouble in the future. In my opinion, there are so many demonic beasts here that we can't even see the end. Why don't we just increase our cultivation here? Xiren's lips curled up into a faint smile. Although the long battle had caused him to feel tired, he was still happy when he thought of increasing his cultivation. After all, the process of increasing one's strength was originally boring. They were already used to it. That's a good idea. Mo Yunjue nodded. He agreed with this idea. Di Beichen chuckled. This will depend on everyone's thoughts. The reason they could kill the demonic beasts without any worries was because they knew that once they couldn't hold on anymore, there would be someone behind them to help them. If there was no one to help them, they wouldn't be able to reach this step. Ao Lingxiao shrugged. If we can increase it a little, then so be it. As he thought of this, he couldn't help but look at Ao Zhengquang behind Jun Lingxuan. So many people had already died, yet Ao Zhengquang was still alive. He was truly a scourge that lived for thousands of years. However, this was also good. He wanted to personally kill this bastard to avenge his parents. At first, everyone only thought that Di Beichen and the others had great endurance, and they admired them very much. However, as the time went beyond their imagination, they were shocked. This was because he had persisted for far too long. Their essence energy seems to be limitless. How did they do it? It's not just their elemental energy. They haven't shown any signs of fatigue, even after fighting for so long. Don't tell me they don't get tired. Everyone looked at each other, their hearts filled with doubt. How did these people cultivate on a daily basis? If that was the case, then how terrifying would their daily cultivation be? For a moment, countless contrasting thoughts flashed through everyone's minds. The only thing they had in common was that they had completely changed their view of the cultivators from the lower realms, who said that the cultivators of the lower realms were inferior to them. These guys in front of them were much stronger than most of the people present. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others did not continue to hold on after sensing the changing gazes of the crowd. Instead, they chose to switch people out. If they wanted to continue, they could do so. However, they did not want to reveal all of their trump cards. Chapter 50-46. When they saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had finally been replaced, everyone heaved a sigh of relief, and their hearts finally calmed down. Xu Yingming followed closely behind. When he passed by Di Beichen, he said coldly, "Petty tricks. Don't be too proud." Hearing this, Di Beichen glanced at him indifferently. "I didn't expect you to pay so much attention to me." Xu Yingming's voice faltered. Faced with this, he didn't know how to respond. Di Beichen's lips curled into a mischievous smile full of mockery. Jun Lingxuan and Xiao Soa couldn't help but look at each other. Their hearts were filled with complex emotions. Everyone thought that Di Beichen and the others had already used all their strength. However, they understood that this wasn't the case. The powerful techniques that Bailey Hongzhuang used to deal with them had yet to be used. As for Di Beichen, they also didn't know if he was hiding any other techniques. As for these techniques, unless it was a matter of life and death, they probably wouldn't use them. Therefore, they couldn't determine the true strength of the other party. The only thing they could confirm was that the strength that they had displayed was enough to make them feel a chill in their hearts. Following this, everyone used the method of walking and resting. Whenever everyone had used up too much origin energy and needed to sit down to recover, everyone would stop. If most people had sufficient origin energy, they would choose to continue walking. During this process, their progress was quite good. However, there were also cultivators who died because of carelessness. However, after walking for a while, they suddenly realized that the demonic beasts in front of them had changed. They were even stronger than before. These purple lightning cloud-spitting beasts' attacks have lightning attributes. Their destructive power is even stronger than the green demon beasts. Damn it! Is this immortal cloud mystery realm trying to play us to death? Who knows what other demonic beasts will appear if this continues? The sudden change caused everyone who originally had some hope to fall into despair once again. Facing the purple lightning cloud-spitting beasts, the pressure they had to endure would greatly increase. Originally, everyone had used all their strength to ensure their own safety. Now that they were facing such a situation, it was even more difficult to ensure their own safety. Beichen, this is really bad. Di Xiaofeng's eyes darkened. The purple lightning cloud-spitting beast specializes in speed. We definitely can't let it get close to us. Otherwise, the paralysis effect of the lightning will slow down our reactions. Coupled with the sneak attacks of other beasts, we will be in great danger. Hearing this, Di Beichen's face turned serious. He had long expected that this test would not be simple, but it seemed that he had still underestimated it. There's nothing we can do about it. We can only choose to continue. Everyone, keep your spirits up and don't get distracted. If you do, you'll lose your life. Emperor Xiaofeng raised his voice and reminded the cultivators of his family. As the leader of the team, his responsibility was to ensure the safety of his team's cultivators as much as possible. Otherwise, even if he returned alive, he wouldn't be able to face his family. Yes, the cultivators from the Di family and the Lin family all nodded their heads and braced themselves, not daring to relax for even a moment. Along with the appearance of the violet lightning cloud spray beasts, the speed of everyone's advance slowed down. Correspondingly, the consumption of their essence energy became even faster. Chapter 50-47. One after another, cries of alarm mixed with screams of pain resounded. After fighting for so long, everyone was already mentally and physically exhausted. Coupled with the increase in the combat power of the devil beasts, the situation started becoming one-sided. The injuries on the cultivators increased without stop. There were even some who were careless and lost their lives. The number of casualties started increasing rapidly. As they saw this, everyone couldn't help but become nervous. The more people there were, the higher the possibility of them surviving. The moment the number of cultivators that died increased, they might end up staying here forever. What should we do? Everyone started panicking. Nervousness and panic were contagious. Immediately, the number of injured cultivators increased greatly. Everyone calm down first. Chen Feng raised his voice and shouted, "It's pointless to be anxious now. The only thing we can do is to continue walking." However, everyone's dissatisfied voices became louder. If we had known earlier, we wouldn't have come here. If we had stayed here, we would have been able to protect ourselves. Is there any point in saying all this now? Chen Feng's expression was ice cold. If you don't want to leave, you can continue staying here. If you want to leave, we can continue our journey. As soon as he said that, everyone's face was filled with anger. However, they did not dare to flare up. At a time like this, the moment they separated, they would be done for. At this moment, Chu Yingming's gaze landed on Xiao Shou. Xiao Shou, aren't you the next holy maiden of light? Using the power of light can have a healing effect. As Chu Yingming's voice faded, everyone's gaze landed on Xiao Shou. The reason the power of light was so highly regarded was because it had a healing effect. Moreover, it could also increase everyone's combat power. Under such circumstances, the power of light could be of great help to everyone. Previously, everyone was immersed in panic and had forgotten about this. Only when Chu Yingming reminded them did they realize this. Seeing everyone's attention on her, Xiao Shou's eyes flashed with a trace of panic. In fact, she had thought of this long ago. However, she had never used it. The reason for this was naturally because she was worried that if Bailey Hongzhuang used it at the same time, everyone would discover the problem. However, now that Chu Yingming had raised this problem in front of everyone, she had no reason to not use it. Xiao Shou, hurry up and use it. Look at the situation now, you have to do your part. Isn't the role of the Saint of Light to help everyone out of despair? Why aren't you reacting? Everyone's eyes were filled with doubt, and some couldn't help but criticize him. At this time, everyone was doing their best. Xiao Shou clearly had the ability, but she didn't make a move. Jun Lingxuan also had some doubts. In fact, when he confronted Bewitching, Xiao Sou's reaction had already made him feel very strange. Later, he also asked about this, but Xiao Sou never gave him an explanation. After everyone's reminder, Bailey Hongzhuang also remembered the use of the light attribute. In fact, she hadn't been cultivating light energy for a long time, and most of her mind was filled with cultivation methods. She didn't have a very good understanding of them. However, she did know that there were some enhancement in healing effects. Master, I know what to do. Chapter 50-48. Naturally, this memory also included the use and method of using the light energy, but it had been quite busy since coming out, so it did not tell Bailey Hongzhuang in detail. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up, and she quickly said, "Tell me about it." In fact, this method is very simple. Just change the way to use the light energy. Master, just remember the chant, and the way to use the power. Then, Xiao He told her the method in her memory. Fortunately, this method was not complicated, and Bailey Hongzhuang was very smart, so she quickly understood. So, it's already like this, just use it, don't worry so much. Jun Lingxuan could not help but say. Yes, sister. Xiao Sudong nodded. I feel like these people are going to eat us up. Seeing this, Xiao Sou's face flashed a trace of hesitation, and finally turned into a thick helplessness. In the next moment, the light energy was released from Xiao Sou's hands, and she gradually began to chant. The chanting voice with the light energy swept through everyone's heart like a spring breeze, and the fatigue on everyone's body seemed to be healed in an instant, and they became much lighter than before. Discovering this change, everyone's faces finally burst into a smile. The fatigue of their body and the soreness of their muscles were also important factors that affected their performance. Now that their fatigue had been reduced, they only felt that their whole body was much more comfortable. The Holy Maiden of Light is really capable. Just this method alone is already very powerful. A series of praises sounded. The long-term high-intensity battle made everyone physically and mentally exhausted. And now that they were relaxed, they felt light and refreshed. That's right. The position of the Holy Maiden of Light has not been inherited for so many years, and Xiao Sou is the only one who has appeared in all these years. Her ability naturally cannot be underestimated. It is because of this identity that Xiao Sou can become the pride of the heavens. For a moment, everyone was full of praise for Xiao Sou, and in the future, if Xiao Sou did not make a move, their situation would not have improved. Feeling the change in everyone's attitude, Xiao Sou was also happy, but her eyes unconsciously fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. She was worried that Bailey Hongzhuang would do the same. But after thinking carefully, she suddenly remembered that the chanting was a method mastered by the Holy Light Assembly. Bailey Hongzhuang had not been in the upper realm for long, and most likely just started cultivating the light energy, but she probably did not master the chanting method at all. Thinking of this, the worry in her heart suddenly disappeared, and it was replaced by pride and satisfaction. In this way, this was the best time for her to perform. Previously, she had been shrouded in Bailey Hongzhuang's light, and it was impossible for her to make a comeback. But now, she wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to completely suppress Bailey Hongzhuang. Xiao Sudong's eyes were filled with surprise and admiration, and holy power spread out with Xiao Sou as the center, like a drizzle moistening the dry earth, inspiring every cultivator. Big Sister should have used her big move long ago, and not let Bailey Hongzhuang be proud for so long. Nangong Yuqing also laughed and said, Not bad, Bailey Hongzhuang is also of the light attribute, so what? In terms of light energy, no one is Miss Zhao's opponent. Chapter 50-49. Previously, when Bailey Hongzhuang unleashed her light energy, I felt that her energy was purer than Xiao Sou's. Perhaps it was an illusion? Xiao Sou is the next saint of the light world. So what if Bailey Hongzhuang's energy is purer? The secret techniques of the Light Sacred Assembly are never divulged to outsiders. Naturally, Xiao Sou is the one who has mastered most of them. Furthermore, both of them have the same attribute. As long as Xiao Souo becomes the saint of the light world, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for her to make life difficult for Bailey Hongzhuang in the future? Instantly, the cultivators could not help but sigh. It would be very difficult for Bailey Hongzhuang to perform well in the light attribute in the future. Jun Lingxuan looked at the pure and beautiful Xiao Souo beside him as a smile appeared on his handsome face. Indeed, as long as he could marry the saint of the light world, not only would he not be inferior to Di Beichen, he would be even better. This was because the saint of the light world was backed by the light sacred assembly. That was equivalent to pulling the entire sacred assembly's power to their side. The light sacred assembly was the most powerful force among all the sacred assemblies. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang had become a deacon in the Alchemist Guild, as long as she was not the president of the Alchemist Guild, Bailey Hongzhuang could not be compared to Xiao Souo in this aspect. However, just as everyone was certain that Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely lose in this aspect, Bailey Hongzhuang unleashed her light energy as well. Noticing this, the crowd was stunned at first. Then, they could not help but shake their heads. Bailey Hongzhuang is still young and impetuous. She actually wants to compete with Xiao Souo in this aspect. How could she possibly win? Indeed, I admire her in other aspects as well. However, she's asking for humiliation in this aspect. No one could deny Bailey Hongzhuang's performance. But at this point, there was absolutely no chance of victory. Lin Yi and others couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang worriedly. In this case, it was fine if she didn't use it. If she didn't use it well, the situation would be very unfavorable to Hongzhuang. Second cousin-in-law hasn't been in the upper realm for long. I heard that her cultivation method was the most external method given by the Holy Light Assembly. She even took the cultivation method from her family. Lin Yi frowned. She had heard about it from her aunt before. With Lin Yi's words, the worry in Lin Qianqian and others' eyes intensified. This situation was truly worrisome. Compared to everyone's worries, Bailey Hongzhuang appeared to be very calm. In fact, she was just trying to see if she could do it. After learning the method from Xiao He, she began to try it out. It had never been important to her whether she was in the limelight or not. On the contrary, in such a dangerous situation, saving her life was the most important thing for her. As long as it could help, she was willing to try. Bailey Hongzhuang just opened her mouth, and the sound of chanting sounded, but the healing power of the light attribute was not successfully displayed. Seeing this scene, Xiao Souo couldn't help but sneer. Her pretty face was full of ridicule. Bailey Hongzhuang, you have only cultivated the light attribute for a short time. You can't chant it. Yes, Bailey Hongzhuang, you should hunt the beastskin properly. Don't humiliate yourself. Xiao Sudong's eyebrows were full of pride. At this time, he naturally didn't mind stepping on Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 50-50. Isn't it because I don't want you to lose face? Xiao Sudong shrugged, the corners of his lips curling upwards in the eyes of Lin Qianqian and the others. I'm just reminding you out of kindness. Don't take my kindness for granted. Io, Lin Qianqian cried out. So you're saying that we have to thank you? If you want to thank me, I don't mind. Xiao Sudong proudly twisted his body, his face full of smiles. Beichen. Di Xiaofeng looked at Di Beichen with some worry. He didn't feel that there was anything shameful about this, but he was worried that Bailey Hongzhuang would force herself to do this. Di Beichen shook his head. Don't worry. Hongzhuang isn't someone who cares about face. She naturally has her own reasons for doing this. Along the way, they had been ridiculed and denied by countless people. Their hearts were already impenetrable. Just a few words of sarcasm couldn't hurt them at all. What's more, he also understood that his wife rarely came into contact with light attribute cultivators. So Xiao Souo's chant at this moment might be very useful to her. If they could seize this opportunity to improve their understanding and use of light energy, it would be extremely worthwhile. Hearing this, Di Xiaofeng nodded. Even though the worry in his eyes hadn't completely disappeared, he didn't say anything else. Bailey Hongzhuang tried 2 more times, but she still didn't succeed. This time, her chant had a healing effect, but it wasn't stable enough. It was obvious that she was still lacking. However, this scene was even more laughable in the eyes of others. Bailey Hongzhuang really won't give up until all hope is gone. Even at this point, she still isn't willing to give up. Nangong Yuqing sneered, shaking his head. Xu Yingming chuckled. If she were to give up at this time, wouldn't she be even more of a joke? Hearing you say that, it does make some sense, haha. Xiao Sou also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with contempt. She felt that her previous worries were unnecessary, even if she didn't know why the other party's light energy was purer than hers. As long as the other party didn't know how to use the light energy, it was impossible for him to surpass her. The only thing she needed to take note of was not to let the other members of the Holy Assembly discover Bailey Hongzhuang. She was always worried that Bailey Hongzhuang's elemental energy was so pure. Would she be qualified to compete for the position of Saintess of the Holy Light? She could not let such a thing happen. So she had to get rid of Bailey Hongzhuang before others found out about her ability. This way, no one would be able to threaten him anymore. However, as Bailey Hongzhuang kept trying, her expression began to change. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang fail again and again, Xiao Sudong laughed as if he was looking at an idiot. However, he noticed that Xiao Sou's expression was a bit strange. He couldn't help but ask, "Big sister, what's wrong? Why do you have such an expression? Big sister?" Xiao Sou was stunned. It wasn't until Xiao Sudong shook her that she came back to her senses. "Big sister, what are you thinking about?" Xiao Sudong was puzzled. "Nothing. That's good." Xiao Sudong didn't mind. Look, Bailey Hongzhuang is still trying. Doesn't she feel like she's become a joke? Chapter 50-51. However, Xiao Sou could not continue to mock her like everyone else. This was because she realized that Bailey Hongzhuang's chanting was getting better and better each time she tried. The reason why no one noticed it was because her chanting time was very short. Every time she realized that something was wrong, she would stop. And the next time she chanted, the previous problem was corrected. Among everyone, only Xiao Sou could sense it, but her heart was also filled with disbelief. She could not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang could identify the problem so quickly and correct it. One had to know that she had studied and corrected under her master's guidance for an entire month before she successfully mastered the chanting method. However, there was no one to guide Bailey Hongzhuang at all. Bailey Hongzhuang was able to discover the problem and correct it in the shortest time possible. This was simply impossible. Most importantly, she realized that under Bailey Hongzhuang's constant correction, she was actually about to succeed? How could this be? The D family's Bailey Hongzhuang is really stubborn. It's already at this point, and she's still not willing to give up? I also feel hungry. It's enough to make a joke. If this continues, it's really embarrassing. She doesn't think about it. Even if they have the same attribute, how long has Xiao Sou been in the Holy Light Assembly? In this aspect, Bailey Hongzhuang can't compare at all. A cultivator couldn't help but say to Di Xiaofeng, "Di Xiaofeng, in my opinion, let Bailey Hongzhuang perform the zither technique. Why waste time on other aspects?" There was no time to waste in such a perilous situation. However, just as this cultivator's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang's chanting did not stop. The pleasant voice entered everyone's ears like the sound of nature. When they suddenly saw this scene, everyone could not help but be stunned. Dense astonishment appeared in their eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang's entire body blossomed with a holy white light. She, who was already wearing a white robe, appeared even more elegant and ethereal. As her red lips opened and closed, a pleasant chanting sound spread out, carrying with it the unique healing properties of the light attribute, streaking across the hearts of everyone present. No one thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's continuous attempts would actually succeed. Therefore, when everyone heard this, they were still in a daze for a long time. Am I seeing things? He actually succeeded? Damn, how did he do that? Isn't it said that the Holy Assembly's unique chanting is very difficult to master? Everyone looked at each other. This was too shocking. Lin Qianqian and Lin Yi looked at each other. Their eyes were full of excitement. Hongzhuang is really amazing. She actually did it. Murong Jing couldn't help but look at Di Xiaofeng. Xiaofeng, Your sister-in-law is really amazing. Di Xiaofeng smiled slightly, then gave Di Beichen a look. You're right. Bailey Hongzhuang's success did not exceed Xiao Soa's expectations. In fact, when she noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang's chanting was constantly improving, she already knew that it was only a matter of time before she mastered the chanting. However, when she listened to the chanting from the other party's mouth, her heart was still filled with an unprecedented shock. Chapter 50-52. In fact, this was not unexpected to her. The chanting effect itself was determined by the strength of the chanter and the purity of the power. Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation was not much inferior to her, but her primary power was purer than hers. This effect was naturally predictable. It was just that everyone had not noticed it for the time being. Once everyone noticed it, Xiao Soa's heart couldn't help but sink. She didn't understand how Bailey Hongzhuang did this. It didn't make sense at all. Xiao Sudong, didn't you think that Hongzhuang couldn't succeed before? It seems that you have misjudged. Lin Yi turned her head to look at Xiao Sudong. She felt very unhappy about this guy's arrogant and proud look before. The smile on Xiao Sudong's face also dissipated a little, but he insisted. So what if she succeeds? My elder sister is the Holy Maiden of Light. Her chanting effect can't compare. As he spoke, Xiao Sudong couldn't help but feel depressed. On normal days, he had always been quite confident, but he didn't know why. Since entering the Immortal Cloud secret realm, he had become less and less confident in facing the Di family. Even if he was full of confidence, he couldn't help but feel a little weak when he spoke about it. Xiao So originally thought that at least no one would compare her chanting effect with Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, after Xiao Sudong mentioned it, everyone began to pay attention to this point. Thinking of this, she really wished she could seal Xiao Sudong's mouth. Why did he only cause trouble for her? Xiao Sudong, what you said is not quite right. Lin Taxing's voice sounded. Why do I feel that Hongzhuang's chanting effect is better than Xiao Soa's? In fact, Lin Taxing's voice also revealed a bit of doubt. He also felt that this was unlikely, but as he carefully perceived it, he still felt that this point existed. As Lin Taxing's voice fell, Xiao Sudong sneered without hesitation. Lin Taxing, are you kidding? My eldest sister is the next Holy Maiden of the Light. How can Bailey Hongzhuang be mentioned in the same breath as my eldest sister? I didn't think so before, but now that I think about it, I think Lin Taxing is right. The effect of Xiao Soa's singing seems to be inferior to Bailey Hongzhuang's. It can't be. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't even know how to sing before. How can she surpass Xiao So in such a short time? Previously, when Bailey Hongzhuang displayed her light energy, I already felt it. Her elemental energy is even purer. If you don't believe me, feel it carefully. The Saint of Light had always been a hot topic. Even though the situation was critical at this moment, the cultivators who were recovering their origin power in the center couldn't help but discuss. And this discovery made them feel as if they had discovered a new continent. Jun Lingxuan looked at Xiao Soa's gradually pale face and suddenly understood what he didn't understand before. It turned out that the reason why Xiao So was unwilling to display her light energy at that time was because she was worried that Bailey Hongzhuang would beat her. It was no wonder that if the crowd hadn't urged her to display her light energy, she also wouldn't have wanted to do so. If it were any other time, it would be a great opportunity for Xiao Se-wu to display her power of light, and she would definitely not miss it. Jun Lingxuan, how can Xiao Soa's light energy be inferior to Bailey Hongzhuang's? Chapter 50-53. Nangong Yuqing also looked at Jun Lingxuan. Currently, Jun Lingxuan was the closest to Xiao So he naturally understood her the most. However, Jun Lingxuan shook his head and fell silent. Seeing this, Xu Yingming and Nangong Yuqing looked at each other, and their hearts sank. The sudden rise of Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen had brought about too many variables. Putting everything together, the Di family's future development really couldn't be underestimated. Look, Xiao Soa's face is so ugly. I'm afraid this matter is true. After someone's reminder, everyone saw that Xiao Soa's face was pale. Although she was still singing, the smile on her face was obviously a bit forced. Xiao Shou has been unable to become the Holy Maiden for so long. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang has shown such talent, do you think the title of Holy Maiden will eventually fall to Bailey Hongzhuang? Hearing this, everyone's faces changed. If it was any other time, they would have refuted this without hesitation, because it was simply impossible. However, after putting everything together, they found that it really was possible. Once the successor of the Holy Maiden of the Light changed, it would really change everything. What nonsense are you talking about? This kind of thing is simply impossible. Xiao Sudong anxiously stood up and wanted to shut everyone's mouths. Correspondingly, the cultivators of the D family and the Lin family were looking forward to it. If this really happened, it would undoubtedly be for the best. Once the Holy Maiden became the wife of the young master, the limelight of their family would be unparalleled. At that time, why would they need to be afraid of the alliance between the Xiao family and the Jun family? With the chanting of Bailey Hongzhuang and Xiao Seiwu, the simple injuries on everyone's body had been healed, and most of their fatigue had dissipated. However, some of the more serious injuries couldn't be healed in a short period of time. This kind of injury still needed to be treated. Although the situation had slightly improved, facing the attacks of countless demonic beasts, their disadvantage was becoming more and more obvious. Bailey Hongzhuang, one of us will be responsible for healing, and the other will be responsible for increasing the battle strength. Xiao Soa looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. She really didn't want everyone to compare her with Bailey Hongzhuang. Rather than that, it would be better for the two of them to sing two different songs to divert everyone's attention. Of course, this was also a very necessary change. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. In this kind of crisis, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, she was willing. Chapter 50-54. Although it had only been a short day, everyone's injuries were extremely serious. The combat power of the demonic beasts was too strong. Coupled with the fact that they were in peak condition, everyone was exhausted. After a long battle, the gap between them was completely revealed. If this continues, I'm afraid we won't be able to hold on for more than 2 days. Lin Taxing sighed. It wasn't that he didn't have hope, but the situation in front of them really made it impossible for them to survive. Alas, everyone is either dead or injured. Although the number of people hasn't decreased too much, all of them are injured and can't fight. We can't go on like this. Lin Qianqian's expression was heavy. At this time, every moment of holding on was extremely difficult. Chen Feng, do you have a plan? Di Xiaofeng looked at Chen Feng. These endless demonic beasts were completely trying to exhaust them to death. Chen Feng's expression was also extremely complicated. The number of demonic beasts doesn't seem to have changed much. At present, other than continuing to hold on, we have no other way out. If this continues, I'm afraid that everyone's hearts will collapse before the demonic beasts finish them off. Di Xiaofeng said helplessly. Di Beichen paid attention to the situation around him, and his heart was also constantly thinking of countermeasures. He originally thought that since Xiao Xuanzi could fly, it would be a good choice if he could take them away from here. However, when he noticed that there were also flying demonic beasts behind them, he rejected this idea. It was simply not feasible. It was as Chen Feng had said. Apart from this method, there were no other methods to deal with this. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang stood up. Everyone's gaze turned to Bailey Hongzhuang, wondering why she suddenly stood up at this time. Immediately after, everyone saw Bailey Hongzhuang directly walk toward the injured cultivators, take out medicine, and start treating the cultivators' injuries. What's going on? Chen Feng looked at Di Beichen with some astonishment. Miss Bailey also knows how to heal injuries? He knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was an alchemist, so it was normal for her to know some basic healing methods. However, everyone's injuries were very serious. Those who had taken the healing pills had already taken them, but the number of pills was similarly limited. If Bailey Hongzhuang was not a doctor, it would be useless for her to help at this time. Don't worry. Hongzhuang is a doctor, Di Beichen replied. However, this voice made everyone present unable to help but be surprised. Bailey Hongzhuang was a doctor? Isn't Bailey Hongzhuang an alchemist? How did you become a doctor? Did Di Beichen say something wrong? At this time, Lin Yi smiled and said, Jun Lingxuan, you don't know this. My second cousin-in-law is not only an apothecary, but also a very powerful doctor. Lin Yi, you have to be reasonable. She is just a cultivator from the lower realm. How can she know so many things? Xiao Sudong rolled his eyes. He only felt that Lin Yi and others were getting more and more exaggerated. They were simply demonizing Bailey Hongzhuang. Even if he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was strong, it was impossible for her to master so many things at the same time. It's up to you to believe it or not. Lin Yi glanced at them. You don't have the ability, but you think others can't do it. You are really a frog in a well. Chapter 50-55. When the crowd saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had begun to treat the injured, they were somewhat doubtful and even resistant. After all, although they were teammates now, they did not have a good relationship with Bailey Hongzhuang. Now that she was suddenly treating them, they felt that something was not right. Bailey Hongzhuang also noticed the strange expressions on the crowd's faces. She stopped busying herself and turned around to treat the injured members of her family. According to her original plan, she would treat the severely injured cultivators and restore their combat power as soon as possible. This was the only way that everyone would be able to hold on for more time. However, she had forgotten that there was not enough trust between everyone. When they saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had turned around to treat the injured members of her family, everyone could not help but secretly sigh in relief. However, they were even more curious about her medical skills. Compared to the doubts and worries of the cultivators from the other families, the cultivators from the Di family and the Lin family trusted her completely. Even Wu Wenfeng admired Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills. Usually, it was very difficult for these guys to ask their young madam to treat them. Now they had actually rejected her. How ridiculous! The crowd watched as Bailey Hongzhuang accurately pierced out the silver needles in her hands and skillfully bandaged the cultivator's injuries. She continuously took out bottles of medicine and looked very professional. Obviously, she was very familiar with these methods. Not only that, Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills, coupled with the effects of the Light Force's incantation, healed the cultivator's injuries quickly. If everything that had happened before was not enough to convince everyone, after witnessing this scene, who would not believe in her medical skills? This effect was something that they had witnessed with their own eyes. Instantly, everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with fervent gazes. They could not help but feel regretful. If they had known earlier, they would not have rejected Bailey Hongzhuang's treatment. Now, they could only watch as Bailey Hongzhuang treated the injured cultivators. They were too embarrassed to ask for it. I never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was actually a doctor. Judging from this situation, I'm afraid that her medical skills are not ordinary. Everyone looked at each other, and many of them secretly nodded. The healing effect of the power of light was indeed good, but because there were too many injured cultivators, and there was only one person chanting, the effect was naturally not as good as the healing effect. With such frequent injuries, there was no doubt that it was best to have a doctor to treat them. He was simply a great savior. Morong Jing nudged Di Xiaofeng and couldn't help but ask, Xiaofeng, is there anything your sister-in-law doesn't know? I don't know either. Di Xiaofeng spread out his hands, but the curve of his lips revealed his emotions. This is really godly. Morong Jing's eyes were filled with amazement. Your family's Di Beichen really has good taste. With such a good daughter-in-law, I don't know how many people would be envious. It's useless to be envious. Beichen and Hongzhuang have a good relationship. I can tell. Bailey Hongzhuang's speed was very fast, and it didn't take long for her to treat the injuries of her family's disciples. At this moment, a cultivator from the Great Devil sect could not help but ask, Miss Bailey, can you help treat me as well? Speaking of their Great Devil sect, it could be said that other than a few forces, they were one of the forces that were relatively close to Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 50-56. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang stared at the man, and her red lips opened slightly. Are you sure? If I can't cure it. Miss Bailey, what are you talking about? No, I believe in you. The man hurriedly waved his hand. In fact, after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's diagnosis and treatment just now, he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills were not bad at all. On the contrary, her medical skills were extremely exquisite, better than many doctors. The other cultivators also understood that Bailey Hongzhuang's words were actually meant for them. After all, the situation where they didn't believe in Bailey Hongzhuang before was still vivid in their minds. Miss Bailey, I'll have to trouble you again. Chen Feng also smiled and said. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded lightly. The indifference on her face faded a little, and there was a trace of gentleness. Di Beichen's friend was naturally her friend. You're welcome. Xiao Soa looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was in the limelight again, and her heart was simply going crazy with jealousy. Xiao Sudong looked at this scene in a daze. His mind was really unable to recover. When he thought of his mocking appearance before, he only felt a burning sensation on his face. It really hurts. After Bailey Hongzhuang treated the injuries of the Great Devil Sex cultivators, the Cloud Sky Sex cultivators also came to seek treatment. At this time, Bailey Hongzhuang did not refuse, because now, only by being united could they have a chance to survive. Lin Qianqian and Lin Yi also followed Bailey Hongzhuang, after seeing her busy appearance, while Di Beichen and others focused more on resisting the monster beasts. After another round of fierce attacks, even Di Beichen could not help but be injured. Bailey Hongzhuang also rushed over after seeing Di Beichen injured. Her elegant lotus-like face was filled with deep concern and worry. Beichen, are you okay? Di Beichen waved his hand, his eyes as gentle as water. I'm fine, it's just some superficial wounds, don't worry. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not pay attention to it. Instead, she carefully looked at Di Beichen. After confirming that the injury was indeed not very serious, she was relieved. You have to be more careful. The attack power of these monster beasts is very strong and fast. If you are not careful, you will be injured. This injury is very deep. It will be very painful to deal with it. Bailey Hongzhuang dealt with the wound while warning him. Her phoenix eyes looked at the ghastly wound, and couldn't help but feel distressed. Di Beichen raised his lips and smiled. With my wife so concerned about me, I don't feel any pain at all. Bailey Hongzhuang listened with a straight face. She stared at Di Beichen with shining eyes. Even if it doesn't hurt, you can't get injured easily. My wife is right, your husband will obey. Di Beichen nodded. His handsome face was full of seriousness, as if he had received an order. Looking at Di Beichen's appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but chuckle. At this time, you are still in the mood to joke. As long as you are by my side, the surrounding environment is nothing. His deep eyes as deep as the sea rippled with seriousness and determination. What's more, we will definitely leave this place. Looking into those charming eyes, it was as if there was an invisible force that attracted people, making them fall into it, and unable to extricate themselves. Bailey Hongzhuang looked deeply at Di Beichen and nodded. That's right. At this moment, an anxious voice sounded behind Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 50-57. After hearing this voice, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen couldn't help but look at the source of the voice. With a look, they found out that the person who spoke was a disciple of the Chu family. The young master he spoke of was naturally Chu Yingming. Only now did Bailey Hongzhuang notice that Chu Yingming had received a very serious injury when he was defending against the demonic beast. There was a scratch mark on his neck, dripping with blood that kept oozing out. His flesh and blood rolled around, looking very frightening. If the wound was a bit deeper, Chu Yingming's little life might have been lost. Apart from that, there were also a lot of injuries on his body. Blood had already dyed his clothes red. Currently, Chu Yingming's complexion was deathly pale. He no longer had his previous arrogant appearance. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Di Beichen. Chu Yingming was undoubtedly their enemy. If he were to fall here, it wouldn't be a bad thing for them. Di Beichen naturally understood Bailey Hongzhuang's thoughts. A lot of plans flashed through his mind. Right at this moment, Chen Feng said, Miss Bailey, please help us. If something happens to Chu Yingming, the Chu family's cultivators will definitely not cooperate. At that time, it will be very troublesome. Their situation was already precarious. Once the Chu family's cultivators make a ruckus, it will be very difficult to suppress them. If they are even slightly careless, they will be completely annihilated here. Following Chen Feng's words, Di Xiaofeng and the rest had complicated expressions. If they were to miss such a great opportunity, it wouldn't be so easy to find it again in the future. Chu Yingming's gaze landed on Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. If possible, he didn't want to ask for help at this time. However, the injuries caused by the demonic beast were truly strange. Even after taking the pill, his condition didn't show any signs of improvement. He suddenly couldn't understand why everyone's injuries recovered so quickly after Bailey Hongzhuang's treatment. Bailey Hongzhuang, please help us. No matter what, we are teammates now. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang hesitated for a while before walking over to Chu Yingming's side. Master, are you really going to treat this bastard? Xiaohe looked indignant. It had been unhappy with this guy for a long time, and now it had to save this guy. It could not tolerate this. The situation now is special. If we don't help, once the people's hearts are shaken, all of us will be in danger. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with wisdom. Now they couldn't care less about the enmity between them. This is really depressing. Xiaohe pouted. Being a human was so troublesome. She had to take care of so many things. If it were him, he wouldn't help. Looking at Xiaohe's gloomy expression, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but smile and pat its head. Don't be so gloomy. This is also an opportunity for me. I can save him, but I can also harm him. I can also poison him or something. Don't you think it's better than the previous plan? Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xiaohe was first stunned before its eyes became brighter. Master, you're really too smart. Originally, to deal with Chu Yingming, they had to pay a huge price. Casualties were unavoidable. Chapter 50-58. Had it been before, it would have been very difficult to poison Chu Yingming. This was because Chu Yingming himself was very strong. Needless to say, his perception was very good. If there was any sign of poison, he would be the first to notice. However, he was currently injured. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang secretly added something in, he probably wouldn't notice. Most importantly, even if Chu Yingming had doubts in his heart, it was useless. After all, his life was in her hands. When Xiaobai saw Bailey Hongzhuang going to treat Chu Yingming, she couldn't help but look at Di Beichen and say, Master, you're letting mistress treat him like this. Don't you feel unhappy? Di Beichen smiled faintly. What's there to be unhappy about? This is helping an enemy. Xiaobai couldn't help but emphasize that Chu Yingming doesn't look like a good person. Once he recovers from his injuries, he will definitely spare no effort to deal with us. Isn't this the same as giving him a chance to deal with us? Do you think there's any other choice in this situation? Di Beichen raised his eyebrows. If he didn't agree just now, not to mention the Chu family, the other cultivators would also have some complaints. After all, even the slightest disturbance could affect their collective safety. In the face of life and death, everyone only cared about their own interests. Hearing this, Xiaobai couldn't help but sigh. Then we'll just let them off like this? Seeing Xiaobai's incomparably depressed appearance, Di Beichen also found it funny. Don't worry. Do you think your mistress is someone who would suffer losses? Xiaobai was slightly stunned. A trace of confusion flashed in her eyes. Master, what do you mean? You'll know in a bit. Chu Yingming looked at Bailey Hongzhuang who was treating him. His dark eyes were filled with caution and fear. Bailey Hongzhuang, you couldn't have done something when you were treating me, right? Chu Yingming slowly said. If not for the fact that there were no other doctors in the team, he would definitely not ask Bailey Hongzhuang for help. Although he hadn't known this woman for a long time, he knew that she was a vengeful person. The hatred between them was so deep that if not for the pressure, Bailey Hongzhuang would not have come to treat him. Even so, the other party could still play some tricks. And now, he had no way to resist at all. Hearing Chu Yingming's words, Bailey Hongzhuang stopped what she was doing. Her expression was indifferent. Up to you. If you want to treat me or not. I'm too lazy to waste my time. You. Anger was present between Chu Yingming's brows. However, when faced with such a Bailey Hongzhuang, there was nothing he could do. This was because he had no choice. Chu Yingming, this Bailey Hongzhuang isn't a good person. Be careful not to put your life in her hands. Jun Lingxuan couldn't help but say. It wasn't easy for him to find an ally in Chu Yingming. Originally, he wanted to borrow Chu Yingming's strength to deal with the Di family after escaping from here. If Chu Yingming's life was in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang, what else could he do? That's right. This Bailey Hongzhuang isn't someone easy to deal with. You have to be careful. Nangong Yuqing suspiciously looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. The more abilities this woman displayed, the more unfathomable she became. Chapter 50-59. Chu Yingming, who already had scruples in his heart, became more suspicious after hearing the words of Jun Lingxuan and Lin Yiqian. The injuries on his body were indeed serious. If he held on, he might be able to save his life. But if he let Bailey Hongzhuang treat him, he might not even be able to save his life. Bailey Hongzhuang, why don't you swear that you won't do anything to Chu Yingming? Only then will we believe you. Xiao Suo couldn't help but say. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sneer. Who do you think you are? Now you are asking me for help. And I don't want to. You actually want me to swear. Are you out of your mind or sick? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Jun Lingxuan and others, as if she was looking at fools. If you are sick, take medicine. If your brain is not good, I am afraid it can't be cured. In my opinion, you are probably the latter. As soon as these words came out, Jun Lingxuan and others couldn't help but be annoyed. Bailey Hongzhuang, what do you mean by this? Don't you understand what I mean? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Hongzhuang, they are out of their minds. Naturally, they can't understand human language. Lin Qianqian walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and held the latter's hand directly. Don't bother with them. Let's go. Kindness is regarded as ill intent. It seems that I want to save them. I don't want them to dirty your hands. Lin Qianqian was eloquent, and her words were not polite at all. That's right. He is the one who asked for help. And he is also the one who is suspicious. He really thinks too much. Lin Yi snorted. Just ignore him. Don't waste our time. Chu Yingming's face turned ugly for a while. If Bailey Hongzhuang didn't help to treat him, then his situation would be really bad. Wife, come here. Di Beichen beckoned to Bailey Hongzhuang with a gentle and intimate voice. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly returned to Di Beichen's side. Wife, don't waste time on them. If you have the time, why don't you use it to fight against the demonic beasts? You're right. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded with a smile. She didn't want to treat Chu Yingming in the first place. In the next moment, without waiting for anyone to speak, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang had already gone to the periphery. Obviously to them, facing Chu Yingming wasn't as satisfying as facing demonic beasts. Chu Yingming's complexion was already ugly to the extreme. These two fellows really didn't leave him any face. The cultivators of the Chu clan also looked at each other. They did not expect this to be the end result. If they knew this, they wouldn't have to plead with Bailey Hongzhuang before. Wife, although the strength of these demonic beasts has become stronger, the primary power obtained after killing them is also more than before. Overall, hunting demonic beasts here will improve your strength faster, but the risk will be greater. This was also discovered after he came out to hunt demonic beasts. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. So, this is really a good place to improve your strength. Yes, but everyone treats this as a chore. They had long been accustomed to high-intensity battles over the years, but obviously other cultivators were not the same. Although everyone was also focused on cultivation, and they cultivated diligently on weekdays, it was more comfortable to stay in the family after all. The so-called diligence was also relative. There was obviously some gap between them. Chapter 50-60. Ignore them. I think this place is pretty good. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Instead of dealing with those annoying fellows, it was better to stay outside and be at ease. Shangguan Yingying and the others also came out after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang leave. Looking at Di Beichen and Li Wuyo, who were already fighting the demon beasts, Xiren couldn't help but chuckle. You two are quite open-minded. What others see as hard work isn't hard at all in your eyes. Bewitching raised his eyebrows. Don't you think so too? Xiren chuckled. Actually, I really think that hunting demon beasts here is a good opportunity to improve, but the attacks of these demon beasts are too strong. If I could slow down a bit, I wouldn't mind staying here. He shrugged helplessly. Normally, it would take a lot of effort to find a suitable place for training. Now that it had appeared in front of them with rewards, it was simply a great training ground. Di Xiaofeng and the others sighed in their hearts when they heard Xiren's words. Xiaofeng, I actually think that the cultivators in the lower realms are quite abnormal. Lin Taxing frowned and couldn't help but say, could it be that the cultivation methods in the lower realms are crueler than ours? Otherwise, how could they cultivate so many abnormal people? If it was just one person, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, Bewitching and the others were all masochists. In the eyes of others, this high-intensity battle was simply unbearable. But in their eyes, it was so simple. I think we should go to the lower realms if we have the chance. Di Xiaofeng nodded seriously. The current situation might really change. When Chu Yingming and the others saw Bailey Hongzhuang and Li Wuyo leave just like that, they couldn't come back to their senses for a while. Isn't Bailey Hongzhuang too insincere? Xiao Sudong couldn't help but say. Isn't it just an oath? Is there a need to be like this? We're teammates now, so why is she treating me like this? Nangong Yuqing was also dissatisfied. Who would dare to treat him like this? Chu Yingming's complexion is also unsightly, but because his body is very weak, he is unable to get angry. Looking at their angry expressions, Chen Feng couldn't help but say, Bailey Hongzhuang is already benevolent enough to be willing to help you. If you still have so many requests, I think it's better for you to settle them yourselves. As Chen Feng finished speaking, the expressions of Nangong Yuqing and the rest stiffened before becoming ashen. Their gazes shifted slightly, and only then did they realize that the cultivators of the other factions were no longer paying attention to them. If they asked themselves honestly, they wouldn't be willing to make a move against such a person either. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her sword and slashed down. Demonic beasts fell one by one. White Lion's combat power was also very strong. Originally, as a beast king, it was not difficult for him to command the demonic beasts. However, he found that these demonic beasts were being controlled. According to his judgment, this should be something set up by the master, who created the immortal cloud secret realm. After so many years of subtle influence, these demonic beasts only had one thought in their minds, and that was to attack any person or beast that appeared here. As such, White Lion's aura was unable to intimidate them. By the way, Xiaofeng, do you have any news about the Bailey family? Chapter 50-61. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Xiaofeng's face was clouded with worry. Ever since he entered the immortal cloud secret realm, he had been hoping to meet up with Bailey Yunyan. However, along the way, he had not received any news from the Bailey family, and had not seen Bailey Yunyan at all. Although he had not said it out loud, he had been thinking about it. Even when they were chased by the locusts, and almost everyone had gathered together, they had not seen any cultivators from the Bailey family. His heart sank, and he had a bad premonition. The immortal cloud secret realm was a place full of opportunities and dangers. The Bailey family did not have so many places to enter. This time, they were only able to enter because Bailey Hongzhuang had given them a place. There was still a gap in their abilities. However, since they had not appeared for such a long time, it did not eliminate the possibility that they had been killed. I did not receive any news about them. Di Xiaofeng lowered his voice and said slowly, I have also asked the disciples of the other families. They also did not see anyone from the Bailey family. Bailey Hongzhuang's heart also sank slightly, and her eyes became complicated. Although she had not received any news from the Bailey family, she had already confirmed that the Bailey family was her family. The reason why she had given them a place this time was to help the Bailey family. However, if they were all killed here, she would feel very guilty. Moreover, Bailey Yunyan was Di Xiaofeng's sweetheart. It's strange. Why have we not received any news about them? Shang Guanying looked puzzled. Do you think they're still somewhere else and haven't come here yet? Hearing this, everyone remained silent and did not answer. However, they knew that the possibility of this was very small. Di Xiaofeng, who was fighting with the demonic beasts, felt everyone's sympathetic gazes and could not take it anymore. He quickly interrupted. Don't think so much now. Let's focus on fighting the demonic beasts. Don't be careless and lose your life here. That would not be worth it. Seeing this, everyone naturally understood that Di Xiaofeng was just trying to change the topic and did not continue on this topic. At this time, if Di Xiaofeng was distracted, he might be in danger. Hong Zhuang, did you take the opportunity to attack just now? Shang Guanying lowered her voice and asked the question in her heart. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her brows. Do you think I am that kind of person? You are that kind of person, Shang Guanying said without hesitation. I've never seen you go easy on your opponents. It's just that Jun Lingxuan, that guy, destroyed it too early. If you had waited a little longer, I think you would have succeeded. Back then, when Bailey Hongzhuang dealt with the Yu family in the lower realm, she didn't hold back at all. She remembered it clearly. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and could not help but laugh. You're right. The time was too short, but I still did something. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Shang Guanying's eyes lit up, and her smile revealed a hint of slyness. Haha, I know you very well. But what did you do? Chapter 50-62. Pretending to be mysterious. Shang Guanying muttered, but the smile in the corner of her eyes revealed her emotions. For a selfish guy like Chu Yingming, he should be punished. Otherwise, it would be too easy for him. The battle reached its climax. Martial skills were constantly displayed from everyone's body, harvesting the lives of the demonic beasts. Streams of energy entered their bodies as the demonic beasts fell, strengthening their abilities. However, the injuries on their bodies were still unavoidable. From time to time, there would be an additional scar. It's really tiring to go on like this. Lin Taxing couldn't help but sigh. Don't you guys feel tired? Taxing, in fact, this is the result of abuse. We used to be like you, but we've gradually gotten used to it. When Xiren looked at Lin Taxing with a smile, he suddenly remembered that they were also immersed in exhaustion every day. However, as time passed, the benefits were reflected. I'm really curious about how you guys used to cultivate. Taxing. If there's a chance, we'll take you to learn more. Di Beichen's dark blue eyes rippled with a faint smile. His rosy lips curled up as he teased. Okay. Lin Taxing nodded in agreement. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. For 3 days, it was a hellish 3 days for everyone. If everyone could still fight with high morale before, then after 3 days, everyone felt that it was extremely difficult to even move. The center of the team was full of wounded people. Even if their injuries had been treated, they still couldn't recover in a short time. If they were to fight the demonic beasts again, it would be a suicide mission. In my opinion, we should just give up. This time, we're doomed to be wiped out here. A dejected and desperate voice sounded. The longer it went on, the less hope there was. Zhang Jibin, everyone was already very depressed. Don't you think the situation is bad enough? What can we do? Even if I don't say it, haven't you thought about it? As soon as these words came out, everyone's expression became extremely ugly. In fact, they knew very well that there was no hope for them to leave here alive. They just didn't want to say it out loud. If you have the energy to quarrel, why don't you go out and deal with the demonic beasts? The cultivators outside are still fighting with their lives on the line, just to protect you all. Chen Feng's voice was ice-cold and imposing. Zhang Jibin immediately lowered his head. Although his expression was still stubborn, he did not say anything else. Chen Feng walked to the side of Di Beichen and the rest, and asked with a troubled expression. Can you guys still hold up? In the past few days, Di Beichen and the others have been the ones who had acted the most. The endurance of the other cultivators couldn't be compared to theirs at all. It didn't take long before they couldn't hold on any longer. Only Di Beichen and the others were able to hold on. It was really not easy. In fact, They were the ones who were the most exhausted in the past few days, but they were also the ones who complained the least. Because of this, he thought even more highly of Bewitching and the others. Thinking about it, it must be because of this character that they were able to possess such strength, even though they came from the lower realm. Bewitching turned his head and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. I'm fine with it. Chapter 50-63. Let's do it as well. Mo Yunjue, Xiren, Shangguan Yingying, and Ao Lingxiao stood up as well. Their endurance was indeed stronger than ordinary cultivators. However, in the past few days, they had fought more than the others. After such a high-intensity battle, coupled with the unavoidable injuries, they were extremely exhausted. However, the others' situation would only be worse than theirs. Hence, they were the only ones who could do it. Jun Lingxuan and the rest watched as Bewitching's group stood up once again. Their eyes flickered, and their expressions were somewhat complicated. Even they couldn't help but admire the endurance of Bewitching's group. Originally, they were also unconvinced. However, after such a high-intensity battle, they had no choice but to accept it. Bewitching, there aren't many people in the group who can replace you. Chen Feng's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. Based on my judgment, apart from us this time, no one else can replace you. Chen Feng's voice was not soft. At such a time, he did not intend to hide it from everyone. It was better for them to be mentally prepared. As a cultivator, he had long seen through life and death. Although it was still unbearable for him when it happened to him, he still had to accept it. Bewitching's gaze swept past the heavily injured cultivators around him. Indeed, these people no longer had the strength to fight. Even if they forced their way out, their attack speed would not be comparable to the demonic beasts. They would only be sending themselves to their deaths. If that's the case, we are fighting with our backs against the wall, Bewitching said solemnly. Chen Feng nodded slightly. If these demonic beasts do not show any signs of retreating, we can only die here. Bailey Hongzhuang's mood was unprecedentedly heavy. If it were any other day, at least the primal chaos ring would allow them to survive. However, due to the restriction, they could not even enter the primal chaos ring. There was truly no way out. If that's the case, are we going to die here today? Xiao Soa's face was deathly pale. Although she had expected this to happen, she was still unable to accept it. She still had a bright future ahead of her. So how could she throw her life away here? There's really no other way now. Jun Lingxuan's eyes dimmed. At this moment, he didn't even have the thought of hating Bewitching anymore. Who would have thought that he would die in the same place as Bewitching? But I don't want to die. Xiao Soa looked anxious. Dying here is more miserable than dying anywhere else. That is truly a case of not even leaving behind a corpse. Everyone couldn't help but glare angrily at him. Why did he have to say that? What was he trying to do? Sensing everyone's gaze, Xiao Soa couldn't help but shut her mouth. However, her worry still hadn't dissipated. Xiao Soa, don't think that your life is the only valuable one. You make it sound like you're the only one who doesn't want to die. Lin Qianqian rolled her eyes. This girl really had a princess syndrome. She didn't even look at the situation, and was still throwing a tantrum. Bewitching looked at everyone and slowly said, we will do our best to resist until the last moment. If we still can't find a way out, everyone can only prepare themselves mentally. Hearing this, everyone's gaze landed on Bewitching. Chapter 50-64. Bewitching chuckled, but did not say anything else. Immediately, together with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, they took the place of the heavily injured cultivators on the periphery. Who would have thought that these geniuses of the major powers would actually fall to such a state? It really made one sigh with sorrow. Bewitching suddenly thought of a plan and said, wife, you guys hold them off first. I'll set up a defensive formation and see if it's effective. This formation was something he obtained from the historical remains. In fact, he had been studying formations all this time, because according to what he understood from the historical remains, this formation could also play a big role. As long as it was used properly, it could often bring about unexpected surprises. Although he usually studied it seriously, he had never really used it. Now, it could be said that he was forced into a corner with no way out. Hence, no matter what method he used, he had to give it a try. Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes flashed with a trace of light as she nodded and said, "Okay." When Di Xiaofeng and the others heard that Di Beichen had actually decided to set up a formation, they were also astonished. When did Beichen become a formation master? Why didn't I know about it? Di Xiaofeng had a doubtful expression. He only knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had multiple identities, but he did not know that his own brother actually had other identities as well. This was really hidden deeply. Beichen actually became a formation master not long ago, Bailey Hongzhuang said with a faint smile. Chen Feng was also somewhat astonished. However, when he found out that Di Beichen was not a senior formation master, he couldn't help but frown. The attack power of these demonic beasts is extremely strong. If the formation is not strong enough, it will be extremely difficult to resist them. We don't have time to think so much now. No matter what, we have to give it a try. In any case, if we don't give it a try, we're just waiting for death here. Morong Jing spread out his hands. In any case, he had already seen through it. At worst, he would just die. However, before he died, he still held on to the thought of holding on for as long as he could. Chen Feng sighed and nodded. You are right. That is indeed the case. After Di Beichen decided to set up a defensive formation, he didn't hesitate and immediately started to prepare. He had also set up several formations during his daily self-study, but he did not have an accurate understanding of their effects. According to his judgment, the effect of this formation should be quite good. After all, his master's array formation skills were very impressive. Even if he only learned a little, the effect wouldn't be bad. When Nangong Yuqing and the others saw that Di Beichen didn't resist the demonic beasts and instead started to arrange a formation, they were stunned for a moment before rolling their eyes. Nangong Yuqing raised his eyebrows and said, "Could it be that this guy is afraid of death, so he found an excuse to set up a formation? That can't be helped. No one can be so indifferent in the face of death." Jun Lingxuan sighed. He was so exhausted that even moving was difficult for him. Now, he could only resign himself to fate. Why do you think these demonic beasts seem to have gone crazy? Nangong Yuqing couldn't help but curse. Even if we had to rest for a day, it would be good enough for us to recover. As long as they had time to recover, they wouldn't be afraid of fighting to the end. However, they didn't have any time at all. As time passed, the situation became worse and worse. Chapter 50-65. Jun Lingxuan suddenly felt that the heavens were trying to help them by not allowing their family to obtain a single spot. However, they didn't realize this and insisted on entering, resulting in their current situation. Chu Yingming glanced at the two of them in annoyance and said, "If you two have the time to talk about this, why don't you take the time to cultivate and recover your yuan qi? Is there any point in recovering now?" Nangong Yuqing frowned. "Why don't you take a look at our current situation? Even if we recover some of our yuan qi, we're still going to die. Do whatever you want." Chu Yingming was too lazy to pay attention to them. Being negative is your problem. In any case, I won't just sit here and wait for death. Chu Yingming's dark eyes flickered with determination and unwillingness. He didn't believe that he would die in this place. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, he wouldn't give up. Everyone watched as Di Beichen busied himself, and couldn't help but feel curious. Array masters are actually quite powerful, but the inheritance of an array master is very rare, and the array masters rarely accept disciples. Logically speaking, Di Beichen shouldn't have had the opportunity to come into contact with an array master. So how did he learn it? Who knows? Look at Bailey Hongzhuang. She also didn't have the opportunity to come into contact with a doctor or an alchemist. But didn't she also learn it? Moreover, she's very outstanding. That's true. I feel that these people are quite powerful and can't be judged by common sense. I hope that Di Beichen's array will be useful. Di Beichen took out an array flag, and his hand gestures constantly changed. His yuan qi surged, gradually forming an array. Everyone only saw a flash of light, but they didn't know what was going on. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were crazily fighting outside. After attacking for a long time, they viewed the demonic beasts as their mortal enemies. Thus, their eyes were bloodshot, and they couldn't wait to slaughter these demonic beasts. However, just as they were about to continue attacking, a light suddenly flashed, and the attacks of the demonic beasts landed on an invisible barrier. When they discovered this, everyone was first surprised, then their faces lit up with joy. Looks like Beichen's defensive formation has succeeded. Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate and beautiful face was filled with an excited smile, her eyes blooming with surprise as she quickly looked behind her. Bewitching quickly walked over and stood beside Bailey Hongzhuang. "How's the defensive formation?" Hearing this, everyone paid close attention to the situation outside. The demonic beasts were constantly struggling to charge in, but the layer of defensive formation that was invisible to the naked eye was firmly keeping them outside. "Beichen, I didn't expect the defensive formation you set up to be so strong. It can even withstand the attacks of these demonic beasts. I'm afraid the level of this array formation is not low, right?" Di Xiaofeng reached out and patted Di Beichen's shoulder. His handsome face was filled with joy. This was really a glimmer of hope. Originally, they were prepared to die, but in the end, they still had a chance to breathe. Even though they didn't know how long this array could last, it wasn't easy for them to rest for a while. Di Beichen faintly smiled. "Actually, I haven't been studying arrays for long. There's still room for improvement." As for the level of the array he set up, he wasn't too sure. Chapter 5066. Beichen, this formation of yours has played a huge role. Murong Jing was overjoyed as well. Finally, he saw a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. If this formation could withstand the attacks for a longer period of time, they would be able to take the opportunity to recover from their injuries and gain a breather. If this continued, it would not be impossible for them to exhaust all these demonic beasts to death. Chen Feng exclaimed in admiration as he asked, "Brother Di, how long can this formation of yours last?" Di Beichen glanced at the situation outside and saw that under the attacks of the demonic beasts, ripples were gradually appearing on the formation. "I am unable to determine for now. However, we can extend the time by replenishing the formation with origin energy." Di Beichen's eyes rippled with contemplation. Although he had used his formation before, he had never encountered such a ferocious attack. Hence, he was unable to determine the strength of the formation. Chen Feng's eyes shone as he hurriedly asked, "We can replenish the formation with origin energy?" Di Beichen nodded slightly. "That's right. That's great. Why don't we let the heavily injured cultivators replenish their origin energy while we rest at the side? If we can't hold on, we can at least hold on for a while longer." Hearing Chen Feng's suggestion, everyone nodded their heads in agreement. Based on the current situation, this was indeed the best method. As long as there was still a glimmer of hope, naturally, no one would be willing to sit and wait for death. When the cultivators inside noticed that Di Beichen and the rest had actually returned, they could not help but be dumbfounded. "Why have you all returned? What about the outside?" Jun Lingxuan hurriedly asked. Di Beichen's formation has taken effect. It is now able to withstand those attacks. As Chen Feng's words left his mouth, all the cultivators blanked. Uncontrollably, a pleasantly surprised expression appeared on their faces. "Is that true? That formation can withstand the attacks of these demonic beasts?" Shock appeared in Xiu Baixin's eyes. Although they had seen Di Beichen using the formation previously, none of them had taken it seriously. Unexpectedly, Di Beichen had actually given them such a huge surprise. "For the time being, I can resist it." Chen Feng nodded. "This formation has finally given us a chance to take a breather. Hence, I have decided to let the cultivators who have lost their combat power be responsible for replenishing their elemental energy, while the cultivators who still have combat power are responsible for recovering their elemental energy. No matter what, we have to hold on until the last moment." "No problem." Everyone looked at Di Beichen. "Young Master Di, where should we inject our elemental energy? Let me teach you." Jun Lingxuan and the others looked at each other. They didn't expect Di Beichen to be so capable. However, this was also good news for them. They might really be able to survive. Xiao Soa looked at Di Beichen in a daze. Because of Di Beichen's cruelty to her, her heart was also filled with resentment. However, when she saw the radiant appearance of Di Beichen, her mood became extremely complicated. One couldn't help but admit that the gap between the performance of Jun Lingxuan and Di Beichen was truly huge. One could even say that the current Di Beichen was an existence akin to a savior. That was because he had once again brought hope to the despairing crowd. At the same time, Di Beichen had already started cultivating to recover. Bailey Hongzhuang sat beside him and started cultivating as well. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.